On a freezing winter afternoon in the Carpathian Mountains, where snow fell so thick it erased the horizon, and silence pressed against the earth with an eerie weight, 32-year-old Lukas Bauer, an avid outdoorsman from Munich, set out with his loyal German shepherd Argo for what he thought would be a brisk, challenging day hike, a chance to test his body against the elements and find the kind of solitude that only the mountains could offer. But what began as a confident adventure soon unraveled into a harrowing tale of survival, testing the limits of human endurance and proving the extraordinary loyalty of a dog whose instincts and devotion would turn tragedy into miracle. The day had started with deceptive beauty. Blue skies spread wide above glittering peaks, sunlight bouncing off snow like shards of glass, crisp air filling Lukas's lungs with every breath. Yet mountain weather is unpredictable, and as he and Argo climbed higher along ridges crusted with frost, clouds began gathering faster than he anticipated, their dark bellies rolling like waves across the sky, while the temperature plunged in sudden, merciless degrees. And by mid-afternoon, the first flakes fell, small and harmless at first, but quickly thickening into a relentless curtain of white that swallowed every landmark and trail. Lukas checked his phone to reorient himself, but the dreaded words appeared across the screen. No signal. He turned in circles, searching for familiar markers, but the storm had already blurred them into oblivion, and the realization crept into his mind like ice water. He was cut off, lost, with no navigation but instinct, no lifeline to call for help, and the storm had only just begun. Argo stayed close, fur already crusted with ice, his breath puffing like smoke in the frigid air, his amber eyes locked on Lukas, as if to remind him they were in this together. And Lukas, though fear pricked at the edges of his thoughts, forced himself to stay calm, muttering reassurances to the dog, as though hearing them aloud would make them true. "We'll find the way, boy. Just keep moving." But as daylight bled away, and the storm hardened into a full blizzard, visibility collapsed to barely a few feet. Trails vanished under waves of drifting snow, and the world around them became an endless, white void where direction was meaningless, and every step could be leading them deeper into danger. The cold cut through Lukas's jacket, stinging his skin, seizing his fingers and toes in creeping numbness, and each breath burned his throat with frozen air. He tried to keep moving, tried to ignore the exhaustion building in his legs, but hours passed and every stride drained him further, until the thought of simply lying down, of surrendering to the beckoning pull of sleep, began whispering in his mind. Hypothermia is cruel that way. It tempts its victims with the illusion of warmth and rest, and Lukas stumbled dangerously close to collapse, knees buckling, when Argo pressed against him, barking sharply, pawing his chest, pulling him back to focus with a fierceness that seemed almost human, as if the dog knew that surrender meant death. Gathering his will, Lukas forced himself to stagger forward, leaning into the storm. Guided less by reason and more by sheer instinct, and by Argo, who seemed to move with uncanny certainty, sniffing the wind, tugging Lukas one way or another, as though some inner compass pointed him onward. Night fell, a suffocating blackness made worse by the snow's reflection of moonlight, turning the world into a silver blur, and Lukas found a small hollow between rocks, where he scraped together branches, his hands shaking violently as he struck his lighter, again and again, until sparks finally caught and a fragile flame bloomed, its glow a fragile miracle in the consuming dark. He and Argo huddled close to it, sharing body heat, Lukas whispering stories from his childhood, just to hear a voice in the silence, while the storm raged on beyond their small circle of warmth, howling like a living creature determined to break them. By morning, the fire was ash, his lighter dead, and the blizzard, though weaker, still left only desolation. Endless plains of snow, skeletal trees burdened with ice. No trails, no sound but the crunch of boots and the rasp of Lukas's breath.
His food was gone, his water frozen, his body weakened from cold and hunger, but still he trudged on, clutching hope like a fragile thread. Argo became his anchor, nudging him when he slowed, barking when he stumbled, guiding him toward valleys and ridges that Lukas would not have chosen, but somehow kept them moving closer to salvation. On the second night, with no fire and temperatures plummeting, Lukas built a crude shelter of branches and snow, curling inside with Argo pressed tight against him, his only source of warmth. And as he drifted in and out of consciousness, he wondered if they would live to see another sunrise. By the third day, Lukas's body was failing, his lips cracked and bleeding, his muscles trembling uncontrollably, his vision blurring with spots of black, hallucinations whispering at the edge of his mind as he imagined lights in the distance, voices calling his name, figures moving through the snow that vanished when he blinked. And still Argo pressed onward, never faltering, never letting Lukas collapse, until at last, in what could only be described as fate, the dog froze, ears high, nose twitching violently, before bolting ahead into the blinding white. Lukas cried out in panic, fearing his only companion was gone, but then he heard it, Argo's bark, sharp and desperate, echoing again and again, until another sound rose in response. Human voices, faint but real, shouting back through the storm. Crawling on his knees, tears freezing on his face, Lukas dragged himself forward as bright jackets emerged from the haze. Mountain rescue volunteers, drawn not by Lukas's faint cries, but by Argo's relentless barking, the dog who had raced ahead to find help and then returned to guide them back. Strong arms lifted Lukas, wrapped him in thermal blankets, gave him sips of warm liquid, while Argo stood proudly at his side, tail wagging weakly, eyes never leaving his master. As a helicopter roared overhead, lifting them from the mountain's grip, Lukas clutched Argo's fur with trembling fingers, whispering words too broken to hear, but filled with gratitude that no one else could understand. In the hospital, doctors marveled at how he survived 3 days in a blizzard with no phone, no food, and failing strength, sustained only by instinct, sheer will, and the loyalty of a dog who refused to abandon him. And soon, the story spread like fire across Europe. Headlines proclaiming, "Lost in the snow without a phone, the dog who found help in a blizzard." Television anchors marveling at Argo's heroism, psychologists analyzing the bond between human and animal. Survival experts praising Lukas's grit. Yet none of them captured the truth as Lukas knew it. That in the loneliest, coldest hours of that storm, when death pressed closest, salvation did not come from skill or luck, but from a friend who never gave up.